Hello and welcome to another episode of Ask the Expert. I'm Kayla McGowan, editor-in-chief, and today we're tackling the current trends in water damage claims. Our special guest is Josh Ehmke. He is the co-founder of One Claim Solution and general counsel. So please welcome Josh.
Thank you, Kayla. Happy to be here today. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, thank you for joining me. I know we've been trying to get this going, so I'm so excited to kind of talk about what everybody's already talking about, but from your guys' point of view. So, I know there's a lot when we hear the word claims and we hear water damage, mold, all of those things, but I wanted to kind of get with you and focus on what the trends are right now. So, what current trends in the restoration space, especially water damage claims and insurance company, what does it look like with insurance companies? What does that look like right now? What's the behavior?
Yeah, that's a good question because and it's one that I feel like OCS is uniquely positioned to be able to answer because we do process hundreds and hundreds of claims every month across the country, right? So it's we're in a unique position to be able to identify these kind of national trends that we're seeing overall and maybe carrier unique trends that we're able to catch on to a lot faster than other people can because we get to see it across this vast, number and geographic locations on what's going on. So great, fascinating topic. I think one of the main things that we're seeing a lot of recently right now is an uptick in claim denials. It's and I wouldn't even say that it's across all carriers. I think there's just a handful of carriers that are doing it. But it's fascinating. We might get, you know, 20, 25 denials a month come through our office. And of those 20 to 25 denials, really that's between maybe two insurance companies. And so it's fascinating to see how they're doing it. But and also interesting to see, the excuses or the exclusions that they're trying to quote in order to justify those denials. But it's definitely been an uptick over the last year to 2 years. We've seen a lot more denials than we ever saw before. Um, you can ask, why? Uh, and obviously that goes back to the age-old question of, issue of insurance companies exist for a reason, as we all do. We're all in business to make money. And insurance denials, some of them are proper denials for sure. Those ones that'll never change. There are always claims that come through that should be denied. They're not covered under the policy, and those shouldn't be covered. But we're seeing a lot more claims that are valid claims be denied. And it's interesting to see the trends with the carriers on who they're targeting, number one, to make those denials. And from what we've been able to see is there definitely is a trend of um, uh, people that are being targeted, different demographics of people that are being targeted there with those denials. It tends to show you, or at least paint a picture, that they're targeting people that are much less likely to challenge or appeal the denial. And pursue it that way. So it seems like they're targeting people that are just kind of roll over and take the denial and move on, right? Very easy way to save money. I hope that's not the case, but that's the picture that it's painting, which is very sad and dangerous. Um, so that's one of the big increases that we've seen with trends is those denials. Another trend that we're seeing, Kayla, is and this has always kind of been there in the industry, but carriers stepping in, and maybe not even carriers so much as it is adjusters, right? This might be more of an adjuster specific problem. But we're seeing a lot of adjusters stepping in early on in the claim process, especially in the water damage stuff, in order to try to get a contractor removed from the job and have their own preferred vendor inserted into that job. Why that's happening more, um, I can't tell you. I have my suspicions on why it's happening. And I hope those suspicions are not valid, but based on conversations I've had with adjusters as well as, preferred vendors and the independent contractors out there, it seems to be that there is specific reasons for it. But man, for contractors, that's a dangerous game that they're having to play, right? Is you want to work together with the carriers and help the carrier be part of the claim process, be able to have open access to what's happening with the loss and the scope of loss. And but the more independent contractors try to involve the carrier, the more we see the carrier try to have that contractor removed from the job, even after the carrier knows about the signed contract and work authorization and all of that stuff, which is a huge no-no. The carriers cannot do that. But they do it. And I have my suspicions as to why. Obviously the first is it definitely saves the carriers money if they can get their preferred vendor on the job because they get to control exactly what's done on the scope, right? And they can limit their exposure that way by getting their own contractor on the job that works for them and not really the homeowner. Um, and there's a few others that I won't go into right now, but there definitely are reasons why we see it happening more and more. And that's scary. In order to combat that, man, a contractor really, I get these phone calls, Kayla, probably between 5 and 10 times a week. I'll get these phone calls from contractors saying, "Hey, we've got this adjuster trying to get us kicked off the job. What can I do?" And um, there are ways that a contractor can protect themselves from that. Number one, it's making sure that the adjuster has a copy of the work authorization, that the adjuster knows that the contractor has at least partially performed on that work authorization and started the work. Um, and letting the homeowner know, the policyholder know that this is the game that the carrier is gonna play. Help educate the homeowner on the front end. Hey, look, I'm here for you. You called me. I work for you. You are my duty is owed to you to make sure I do a good job and keep you happy. The
Mhm.
carrier's not going to like that because I'm going to do a very complete and thorough job here. I'm going to make sure everything's done correctly to get your house put back together the right way to where you're happy. The carrier doesn't want that. They want their preferred vendors coming in who they can kind of manipulate and control and say, hey, if these guys come in, we'll guarantee coverage. And these guys don't have any negative reviews really. These people work for us. We can guarantee their work. Blah 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 blah. All the excuses to try to convince the homeowner to go with them, and it can be very convincing excuses and reasons. But at the end of the day, I just see so many examples come through where the homeowner does get convinced to cancel the contract with the independent contractor, go with the preferred vendor, and then they're just left with a mess, right? The preferred vendor doesn't pull out insulation that was completely soaked and has microbial growth in it. I've seen drywall that is completely warped be left in place and tried to be dried in place. There's just so many examples that I can give you of where the preferred vendor has totally cut corners in favor of the carrier, right? In order to limit the carrier's exposure. And that's not right. We all have homeowners insurance to protect our biggest asset, which is our homes. And we need those to be put back together in the horrible event that we ever do have a loss, right? And we don't know that. We don't know what these losses entail. Most people have never dealt with these water losses. And so that kind of gets us maybe into the next topic that you had for us.
Yeah, and I mean, you kind of touched on this a little bit too, just the increase, right, in denials or interference with business, because I think you touched on a lot about the denials, but how much it interrupts the business as well, right? It's a loss for the independent contractor when they've put all their eggs in that basket to help a homeowner and then to be pushed away. That's frustrating, but it's also a cost associated with that, right?
For sure.
Um, and it also interferes with the relationships that could be built between the carrier and the contractor or the contractor and the homeowner, right? Because theoretically, the contractor should have to deal with the homeowner. I know there's some craziness around that as well. But with these increases, I think you touched great on some of what you're seeing. So I want to go to the next burning question that I honestly have, and that's how, like, why are insurance companies increasingly denying appraisals, and how does this affect the restoration process for water damage claims particularly?
Yeah, I think it's a great question too, an area to discuss. It's fascinating. Um, it's a constant chess game in this industry, you know. Carriers will do one thing and then the independent contractors will do something to counteract that move. And it's constantly happening that way. So one of the things that the carriers also like with having their preferred vendors on the job is they don't get a lot of pushback from the preferred vendor. You know, they carry all the cards and they they're the ones that are in charge at that point. The insurance companies are, right? They call the shots. But when you have the independent guy in place, now all of a sudden you have someone whose interests are more aligned with that of the policyholder. Somebody, it's not the contractor's job necessarily to advocate on behalf of the homeowner for the actual real scope of work that needs done, but that's oftentimes where the contractors fall into that role, is they have to help the homeowners, the policyholders justify what's being done and why. And that causes a shift in the scale and the balance, right, to where it really levels it out a little bit, or at least helps level it out. So the carriers, you know, they have all the weight down here, but now the independents come in and they really help balance those scales a little bit. Carriers don't like that because that ultimately just costs carriers more money. But one of the ways that contractors have been increasingly getting involved, or at least helping level that playing field out, is through the appraisal process, right? Where once there's a dispute as to the value of the loss, the contractor works with either the homeowner directly in order to demand appraisal, or by way of, you know, an assignment of benefits, whatever it might be, the contractor is able to work with the carrier for appraisal. And that was working for a while, really, really well. But ultimately, you know, and that appraisal clause, okay, by the way, is a clause under the insurance policy. Almost every insurance policy has that, especially when it comes to residential. There are some carriers that have um, different policies that require arbitration in lieu of appraisal, something like that. But for the most part, appraisal is available on pretty much every residential policy out there. And that is a more independent process, right? It's where people that aren't necessarily involved with the job, it's not the carrier, it's not the contractor, it's not the homeowner, being able to evaluate the actual loss value of that claim. It's independent people, or at least they're supposed to be independent people, to get together and really do that analysis on what that loss value should be. And whatever that appraisal amount comes back at, that's what the carrier has to pay. Obviously, that increases the carrier's costs, not just because they have to pay more and they have to pay a more reasonable amount for the loss, but they also have to pay their appraiser those appraisal fees. They have to, you know, a lot of times they'll have to pay their half of the umpire fees if it has to go to an umpire. And so there are increased costs there for the carrier. That's accountability. Carriers don't like it. Nobody likes accountability. You know, accountability can be uncomfortable for all of us, regardless of what we do in life or where we're working. Accountability can be uncomfortable, but accountability also brings progress. And that's really the name of the game here, and can really level the playing field across the board for everybody. And that's what it comes down to, is carriers don't like that accountability. That's why they fight so much against appraisals, and a few other things that we will get into, I'm sure. But that's why we're seeing an increase in appraisal denials too, is accountability. It goes back to having a real reasonable amount paid for these losses.
Yeah, and I would definitely say maybe lack of understanding plays heavy into that as well. And I think with all of the frustration, when you do have accountability on all sides, it kind of makes people just that accountable. Hey, maybe you didn't know it, but you could have asked before we got to this process of where we're actually going to
Hmm.
appraisal, right?
Hmm.
Um, and then, I think if you don't know something, ask. I think that's the other thing that holds all parties accountable as well. But bringing in that appraisal piece you can't argue. It's in favor of nobody really, but really the homeowner and them getting back into their home or their space and it being operable or livable for them. Because at the end of the day, it's not about the contractor, it's not about the carrier, it's about the insured, the person
That's
who's
right.
actually at the hands of our mercy, right?
That's right.
We're all consumers too, and so if we were in that space, we'd want what was best for us and our home, right? And so I think that's one of the other things that, take a second to humanize what we do. And that's on all sides, right? I know the carriers are doing their job based on what their job is on that side of things. And so, of course, they're going to bring up objections or what have you. But at the end of the day, if we just let them realize, hey, we're all people, like we'll take it to appraisal if we
Yes.
have to, if we have to
Yes.
do that, we will. Um, I've had my own loss, and that was not a fun time. But I'm in the industry, right? So I kind of know how to navigate that. And it
Sure.
took me months to
That's
get,
right.
I mean, months, like almost a full calendar year to
It's
get that
terrifying.
closed. And I'm like, man, if I weren't in this industry, that would have been really hard, right? I probably would end up paying out of pocket. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
I didn't, but that's
It,
probably what would have happened, right?
yes. You're
If I
right.
were not in this industry. And so, education for consumers like the contractors are doing right now is key, but we shouldn't have to get to that point. Which most times when I'm talking to a contractor, I think for you too, they're having to advocate, just like you mentioned a little bit ago, for that homeowner and kind of take them through the entire process and say, hey, no, that's not right. No, this is right. So they're not just playing the contractor role, they're playing like therapist at that point because they're trying to get
Mediator and
yeah, they're trying to
yes,
get them through the
counselor.
process. And
Ugh.
so, I think you talking about appraisal really does help too, because I don't really hear a lot of people talking about appraisals during the claims process. And you mentioning like a majority of policies actually do have that in there. Maybe it'll help a contractor actually take a second and say, hey, maybe I should relay that to the consumer so they can actually look at their policy and see if that
Yes.
clause is in there, right?
Yep.
And I think most times we know insured don't really know what their policy says anyway until they have to use it, right? I think
Mhm.
we're all guilty of that. It's
Truth.
millions of pages, it feels like. Most people are actually shopping around because of the cost, not necessarily the coverage. And so
Correct.
we're also fighting that uphill battle as well. So, I think it's just interesting to hear all of these variables. And one variable that I want to talk about, you briefly did mention, was the assignments of benefits, AOB. How are insurers pushing back against those by limiting its scope? Or refusing to honor it altogether. I think you kind of touched on it, but maybe dive into that just a little bit more because assignments of benefits, I know we hear it talked about, but is there a real understanding of what that really is?
This is probably my favorite topic in the entire industry, Kayla. Okay. So as an attorney, I've been involved in the water damage restoration space for more than a decade now. And it's been my primary and only focus from in the practice of law is this space. And so my background before I got into this space was in medical billing, right? And so in the medical world, assignments of benefits are used every day and have been for years and years. Anytime you go see your primary care or you go to the emergency room, you always have to sign an assignment of benefits. I don't know about you, Kayla, but I personally have never received a check from my health insurance company. It's always gone to the healthcare provider. Okay. That's just the way that industry operates. Everybody knows it. That's just the way that it goes. Whether those doctors are in-network doctors or out-of-network doctors, those assignments are honored. Okay. Why not? Why not in the restoration space then? It's the same law. It's the same, it's the same document. It's the same tool. Health insurers, they understand it. They approve it. Our economy is driven by it. Could you imagine in the medical space if patients were receiving those health insurance checks? Could you imagine
Absolutely
what that
not.
would do to our economy?
Oh my gosh, no. Absolutely not.
Because we know what happens when homeowners receive those checks. It's war to get those checks from these homeowners sometimes because it comes at the perfect time to fix the truck. Or, man, my kid's just about done with high school and we've never gone to Disneyland. Let's go to Disneyland, right? and I'll just make payments to the contractor over time. It'll be cheaper than putting it on the credit card. Happens all the time. So why? Why do they do that so much in this space? And it's because they can, and they have been doing it. And so there's a lot of negative connotation out there with the assignment of benefits. I get it. When I first got involved with the industry, I was able to see the abuse that happened with the assignment of benefits in some instances and in some locations, right? But when the assignment is used correctly, just like it's being used elsewhere. And for the most part, it is used correctly. You have bad apples everywhere. There's bad apples in the medical world. There's bad apples here. Bad apples, right? You can't judge the entire industry off of a couple of bad apples. But when the carriers and oftentimes even public adjusters, when they see this assignment of benefits come through, they fight against it really hard. Makes you ask why. Why are they fighting against it so hard, Kayla? And really, what we've seen is it comes back to that A word, the accountability, right? The contractor now, under the assignment of benefits, gets to stand in the shoes of the policyholder in order to be paid directly from the carrier. Before or without the assignment of benefits, the carrier and these adjusters never ever have to talk to the contractors. They don't. They can just talk to the policyholder and say, hey, look, I know that you had an invoice for $8,000 to dry out this water damage, but your coverage really only allows for $3,000 of that. So you can work with your contractor in order to figure out the other 5,000, but your policy only covers $3,000. Most people are going to say, oh man, that stinks. I can't believe that so they're going to be either mad at the contractor and say, I'm only getting $3,000 for this because my policy doesn't cover it. Can we make payments, or I'm only going to pay you $3,000 and that's what it is. And the carrier is ultimately able to say, sweet, I just got away with paying $3,000 on an $8,000 invoice because I can. And the policyholder doesn't know any better. But when the carrier adjuster has to work with the contractor, because the contractor now has those rights, now the adjuster and carrier's dealing with someone who's educated, and they can say $3,000, hold the phone, And what's interesting about that is my son, he just started taking an IICRC certification course, the WRT course, this morning, and he came out. It's an online live stream class that he's taking, and he came out of his room and he's like, Dad, I've heard you talk about this for years and everything that's going on with the industry and water damage and that kind of stuff. He said, but I never knew it was this complicated. He goes, the equipment that these contractors are using is pretty expensive and it can be kind of technical. I said, yeah, it can be. And I said, could you imagine if an adjuster had to take this IICRC certification class too? They would understand so much better, right? And it kind of triggered the conversation between us of kind of what's wrong with the industry. You have good adjusters. Okay, there's some fantastic adjusters that I've come across in my career where I'm like, man, you're a good person and you're trying to do the right thing. You're trying to justify and make sure that everything that you're approving to be paid by the carrier is on the up and up. That's a good thing. It's the adjusters that are not that. It's the adjusters whose primary goal is to pay as little as possible. Why? I don't know. There's probably some incentive on the back end for them to pay as little as possible. And the easiest way for them to do that is to not deal with a contractor who's educated, right? And so they will fight and fight and fight against the assignment of benefits. And they do it by either, number one, in your question, you talked about just outright refusing to honor it. Oh, we don't honor assignments. Most people aren't going to challenge that. They don't know how to challenge that, right? And to be fair, in some states, the adjuster might be right. They don't have to honor that. Contractors should be getting involved in your state on that assignment of benefits issue. Help your legislators understand the importance of the assignment, that it actually truly does help protect consumers. It does. It can be used as a weapon both ways. But in all actuality, it's there to protect consumers, because without that, the only option a contractor has is to go and file a lien on the home. in order to protect their payment. Whereas with the assignment of benefits, they're able to keep that dispute and payment with the carrier who's legally obligated to pay it anyways. So it really does protect the consumer. And the carriers and even public adjusters will fight behind that for different reasons, but fight the same fight, right? Accountability on the part of the carrier. And public adjusters, we often see don't like it because, like I said, it allows the contractor to work directly with the carrier for their payment. It requires the carrier to issue payment directly to the contractor, and the contractor can justify their own services, right? They're not adjusting anymore. They're doing their own, trying to get their own invoice paid. And they have the legal right to do it under that assignment. So public adjusters don't like it because that cuts into their business model and the amount of potential clients they have. So they don't like it either. Even though they use it. Because in their contracts, their public adjusting contracts with the policyholders, they have the assignment of benefits with public adjusters, and they're able to do that. So there's different reasons why the AOB is so fought against, but man, when it's used correctly, it is the single tool that will help level the entire playing field and really bring accountability to both sides of the equation. If a contractor is really being accountable and doing good work and justifying its work and documenting everything correctly, the assignment of benefits will allow them to be paid correctly. So I'm just a big fan of the assignment, but it's a big fight. Carriers do not like it. And public adjusters often fight against it too. They'll limit it by saying we don't honor it. They'll limit it by saying, you know, it only allows you the right to receive payment, nothing else. But that's going to be a constant fight. And we're currently involved in the court system right now, in several places on this issue of what the true extent of the assignment of benefits really is. What does it really allow the holder to do under that assignment? Is it just the right to receive payment? I went against a carrier back in 2018 under the assignment and was able to get case law here in Arizona surrounding what the assignment really does. And that's now being attacked and split out saying, well, it only allows you to do this, but not this and that and that. So it's going to constantly just be that chess game that we talked about, for forever. But as long as contractors are willing to stand up for themselves and there's people out there and organizations that are willing to help stand up for the contractors, we've seen a lot of progress over the last 10 years in favor of contractors, a shift to be able to have more accountability and more reasonable payments being made. And it's good to see. And I hope that continues because it's really good progress. There's different organizations out there like the RIA that have been doing amazing things with their advocacy groups. I really love seeing what they're doing. And so that's what it's going to take is everybody working together in order to continue to make this progress. It's exciting to see.
Yeah, and I would definitely say, there's always going to be something that we cannot agree on, right? No matter what happens, when it happens, how it happens. But I would definitely say, the analogy that you use with like our medical insurance compared to our homeowners insurance makes a lot of sense, if I'm being quite honest, because when it comes to you as a person, to your point, maybe something else has caused you to, need that money now, whether it's a car or maybe a family emergency. You're more likely going to use that money for what it's not intended for. And then it also puts the homeowner on a hook for having to pay an additional bill, right? And so there's all of these, like you said, chess. You're moving your pieces, but really it could really affect the homeowner in a negative way. At the end of the day, you get that money, use it on something else, and now you're on the hook to finish paying for the restoration process and so on.
Yes,
And so it does make it really complicated and convoluted, especially because most times when a homeowner is receiving a check, it may not always be clear on what they're receiving it for, right? And
also
so
true.
you could have a household with a husband and wife, and the wife opens the check and she's like, "Oh, this is great. We're just gonna go put this in the bank account and pay maybe some bills or whatever." That also could be a really big problem, right? Especially if it's the
Mhm.
husband or maybe the wife or whoever dealing with the contractor and the insurance. And so I think, assignments of benefits broken down in this way and discussed opens a lot of doors, and I hope it opens a lot of people's eyes to get involved and advocate for their state, right? Because like you said, some places may not honor it, some just may say, no, we don't do that, or it only covers X, Y, and Z. And I think, you know, to your point, RIA, IICRC, Normie, several other people are working on legislation. I think it involves a heavy voice from the contractor as well, not just the organizations and a select few. We on the contractor level need to also get involved and see where things are in our state. What if there's something that's not in the works for AOB or changes in policy or whatever the case may be? You can be that voice. You know, it just
That's
takes
right.
one person to start that movement, and others will fall and order it and help as well. Because that's what it's going to take. To your point, it's going to take bigger powers at B to enforce what we're trying to accomplish here. And
That's
at the
right.
end of the day, it benefits the homeowner a ton. And it actually, accountability is on both sides, the contractor and the carrier side. Because, like you said, to your point, there are bad apples on all sides in all industries. And so this also holds us as contractors more accountable as well, because, there are people who do take advantage and maybe abuse things, and that's kind of where an adjuster may have a bad taste in their mouth, where now they take it out on everybody else down the line, right? Because that's normal, that's human, you're protective.
That's right.
And so, I think we've talked a lot, and you did cover about a next question that I had about the dangers of AOB. Thank you for covering that, because I also
Oh,
think, maybe you see the good side of things, but maybe the bad side of things or potential hidden dangers are not discussed. And you even mentioned why they do oppose AOB, and by they I mean carriers and public adjusters, which that was really great to hear too and understand that, because personally on the PA side of things, I really wasn't sure how that would work and what they thought about AOB. So thank you for breaking that down. For me personally, it was great to hear that. I do have another question for you though. How
good.
can we as restoration professionals better navigate these disputes when the insurer's scope of work doesn't align with the damage assessment that we've put in place?
Yeah, that's a good one. And I guess it can be answered with another question, or at least, in part, which is why won't the carrier scope align with ours, right? And there's a few options for that answer, right? It's either the carrier is trying to limit the scope in order to limit the amount of money to be paid out. That's the cynical view, which is probably what I see the most common anyways. The second is the contractor just didn't do a good job of documenting the scope, right? Why did it take you 5 days to dry out the structure instead of 3? Um, why did you need the extra air mover in that room? Why did you need an extra large dehumidifier instead of a large? Different things like that, right? If the contractors are doing a good job of documenting what they're doing and the why, it really makes the carrier's job way more difficult to scrutinize that scope and hack it down and reduce it. But it's really, you know, and I'm sure people are getting tired of me saying this, but I've got 5 kids. Okay. That's a lot of dentist bills that I've had, and they like candy. And so, my kid's dentist, his one of his favorite sayings is only floss those teeth you want to keep. And so, when I hear that, I turn around and I liken it to this industry and with contractors that I represent and that OCS is involved with. You know, OCS's job is to try to get the contractor paid legitimately for the work that they did. OCS's job is way easier when we have contractors that do a good job documenting what they did and why. And so I turn it around to contractors and say, hey, only document those line items that you actually want to be paid for. If you don't want to be paid for a line item, don't worry about documenting it. So it goes that's where it goes back to, is if the contractor really wants to be paid for something and they want their scope to be approved, they owe it not only to themselves to document it correctly, but they owe it to the homeowner to document it correctly, their customer, their client. And it will only help their reputation. It will only help their business succeed and be more successful that way. So that's the best way that I can think of to counter what is happening with these difference in scopes, you know. And it's tough because it's like the chicken before the egg. The contractor needs to, you know, do a good job documenting and have open communication with the adjuster, even during the process. Hey, this is why I'm doing this. Just want to let you know, keep you in the loop, you know. But anytime, like we talked about at the beginning, a lot of times when the adjuster is that involved from the front end, the adjuster is going to use or may use those, might use that opportunity to get that independent contractor removed from the job and have their preferred vendor step in. You know, hey, homeowner, just so you know, this guy that you have right here, they're saying it should be this, and they're wanting to do this and this. My guy's not going to do that. He's just going to come in and keep it to this little here. And you really don't need to do that. You don't need to do the asbestos test here. There's no reason for that. There's really no reason to check for mold, those types of things, right? That'll always happen. But as the contractor documents things correctly, man, as an attorney, when I have a client come in and I have a case that I'm looking at trying to figure out why there was such a low payment, I just smile so big when I have a contractor that is really good at documenting things because it makes my job so much easier to justify what the contractor did. It's great. I have contractors that come in with very little documentation, and I just kind of have to roll my eyes, rub my head, and say, I'll try. I'll see what I can do for you. You really didn't give me anything to go on here. I understand why you did what you did, but you didn't do yourself any favors because you didn't document it very well. Um, that's that's key, Kayla. They got to do it. It's annoying, and I'm sure most of them have the procedures and the policies in place to have their technicians do it, but sometimes technicians get lazy and they don't document and take pictures of that or, you know, so but that's the nature of the industry and that'll always be the challenge. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, and I will definitely say that's the accountability piece on the contractor side, right? The
Totally.
documentation, we have to own that piece 100% because at the end of the day, if you didn't document it, it didn't happen, right? I think we hear that all the time where people say, but did you document it? The
Yeah.
reason why it's said so often is because that's really what really helps your
Yeah.
case. That helps you justify the work that you completed on behalf of the project for the homeowner. But if you didn't document it, it's he said, she said at that point, right?
Totally. Totally. I just had an example of that just the other day where a carrier came in and said, hey, look, I know that there's, you know, personal protective equipment billed on this invoice, but I talked to the policyholder and they didn't ever see their employees have personal protective equipment. Well, number one, does the homeowner know what personal protective equipment is? And then number two, if it's a Cat 3 and the contractor's doing their job correctly, they're going to have a decontamination chamber coming out of a clean or out of the containment area anyways, where they're going to don and doff their PPE. So the homeowner should probably never see them in their PPE anyways. So, but it's things like that. But can you take a picture of somebody wearing the PPE?
You should.
Boom, just done, combated. Juster, clearly a homeowner didn't know what they were talking about. Here's a picture showing them PPE. Oh, perfect. Thank you. Got it. Let's move on to the next one. Done.
Yeah, yeah. And I
So
think that's a good example because I think oftentimes when carriers are working with the homeowner, they're asking questions that are very foreign to them.
totally.
And so, yes and no in their eyes, they could be saying yes to all of the wrong things and no to all the things that they should be saying yes to, right? And so that's where that comes in and gets a little confusing. But for the contractor, if it's documented, whether they said yes or no to these yes or no questions, it doesn't matter because they already have the documentation, days, timestamps, all, drawing logs, all of those things to show and discuss, not combat, discuss why they did
Yes.
what they did. And I think that's another piece that maybe we can talk about later down the road is just the discussion portion of it, not the
Love it.
defensive side of things. Let's be conversational. Take that moment to maybe tell them what number this is in the file that you sent over. I think those are the things that have to happen and continue to happen to kind of help the contractors, with the claims process. We covered a ton. You really informed me of so much that I'm so glad that you provided some clarity. Some stuff I wasn't even thinking about, honestly, as far as clarity, but you gave me some great insights and more ideas, of course, for more content and additional discussions. Before we sign off, is there anything else you'd like to close with before we let everybody go?
No, I appreciate you spending time with me. I get super long-winded on some of this, Kaylee, because I'm so passionate about it, and I'm like, I just love talking about this industry and everything going on with it. And so, hopefully, we covered the topics you were hoping to cover, and I just appreciate your time. And I'm always available for anybody to reach out to discuss. Obviously, I enjoy the industry, so I enjoy talking about it. It's all about education on both sides of the equation and coming to an understanding of what we're really trying to do and make progress. So I appreciate everything you guys do and look forward to the next one.
Yes, thank you so much for joining me today. And as always, thank you for watching and take care. We will see you on the next episode of Ask the Expert.